I don't think.
All right, hello everyone, and I guess welcome to episode number 10, Verdict of the Ancient Kings, episode number 10, Guilty of Laziness, Second Chance, because, well, we had some technical difficulties with the previous cast. Alongside me digitally once more is going to be Nico. Nico, how are you doing today?
Really good, man. How are you?
Um, I've been better. I'm a little tired, but things all in all have been very very up and up. So I am looking forward to the some of the things that we're going to be talking about. We're going to be doing a lot more focus on PVE in general, just because, well, Chronicles of Entrath, there hasn't been an official announcement, but everyone has an inkling that it is just around the corner. And let's go ahead and just dive back into some good PVE, taking a look at a lot of the races and the classes in specifically. Now, one of the things that we do know is that with the eventual upcoming release of Chronicles of Entrath Chapter 2, we're going to be getting higher character levels, perhaps adjustments to the shard grid. There's been talk about mercenaries, and there's also going to be some new talents, but that doesn't mean that we can't look at some of the old information out there. Say, each of the individual races, their specific classes, and what they kind of bring to the table. Now, today, Nico, you did a great job putting together all of these slides and basically summarizing what's currently on the table for PvE in the campaign and maybe what we can expect with another 10 levels under our belt.
Yeah, I mean there's a lot that you can do in the campaign now. I think most people have just started to crack the surface of what the race slash class decks can look like, and this what we're looking at on the screen here is just like you start by picking a race, and then you kind of try to find a class that you think meshes very well with it, and then you look for cards that kind of fit in that same category that
Mm-hmm.
you could play with it. So it's just interesting to be able to look at deck building from a different angle when you're kind of factoring in what class and race cards fit into this thematic that I'm trying to build.
Yeah, I remember the first time I tried to like build a very, very powerful deck in the campaign. I was just like, okay, I'm gonna have 4 copies of this and 4 copies, and then I was like, wait, I don't have 4 copies of that card. How do I not? And then I saw the shard and I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. I can't run my best Frost Ring Arena deck in the campaign. I gotta customize it to the specific character, and it gave the campaign a little bit more of a good feel, as though I was actually that particular race. Even though you could go cross faction a little bit, and just only being able to use, say for instance in the Kyoto, the Diamond Shard, the Wild Shard, and the Sapphire Shard. Those were the things that were really offered to you early on, and it kind of pigeonholed you in a good way thematically into figuring out what you could bring to the table.
Yeah, and when I was creating these slides, I realized, and I kind of knew this already, but it's funny how there's some colors that do not have access at all to the particular race class combo you're looking for. For example, I don't think there's any Sapphire Kyoto clerics. And I also noticed that for Shinhair, there's no blood themed Shinhair clerics. So there's some race class combos that are already cut off in terms of what we currently have available to us in the set.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing to note is that when you are building a race class combo, don't it's fun to play thematically around that and just only put those race classes in your deck, but you're not limited to that. It's more about the shard grid restrictions, as you had mentioned.
Yeah, and one of the things that I liked about the overall gameplay, and we're going to be talking a lot about PVE if you guys are really into that, is even though you have your race and your class, your the unique combination of the two really changes how you build your deck. For instance, the clerics. One of the main mechanics in the cleric was, hey, you run with these blessings that you can random or you can insert into your deck and move them to the top of your deck, which was all really nice. But at the same time, the blessings did different things based on your specific race. And if you take a look at the Kyoto cleric, not only do you have these blessings that you get twice as many zodiac blessings, but you also start the game with a specific zodiac blessing that changed. I believe it was every 2 months. I guess there's only 6 signs of the Kyoto zodiac, and those just change every 2 months. And your deck kind of thematically changed just throughout the year, which was kind of fun and interesting when a new zodiac card would come up.
Yeah, and in fact, I've been playing a lot of Coyote Mage lately, and I have a really fun deck that I'm enjoying. And the blessing right now is draw 2 cards for 0 cost, and you can play it even on your opponent's turn,
Mm.
which is really awesome. So I was even thinking, man, it would be really nice if I had a Coyote Cleric because I could play the ability to make my blessings move up in the deck, and then
Hmm.
I could play a 100 card deck and start with 4 Zodiac blessings in my deck and just if I get one of those, I'm in business because I'm already drawing 2 cards.
Yeah, the zodiac the blessings were just really really interesting mechanics. The Kyoto cleric, I have one, and it just seems like an absolute beast, especially when you combine it with the righteous cleric from the human faction, being able to get these really giant beat sticks down onto the table. They're able to absorb damage, gain life. Every which way you're looking, you're kind of just gaining life all over the place, and the cleric almost seems like thematically in the MMO perspective, like the real tank. Like you can't really do enough damage to the cleric. And what was actually interesting was the main mechanic that I didn't like going up against was the mill mechanic when I was running the Kyoto cleric, because all of like I would see blessings falling off the top of my deck, cards that I had prophesied, like all of those cards were just getting removed, and I'm just going like no, I guess that's like the opposite side of cleric, where you're like, yes, I'm hoping for good things to come, and you're just seeing all of these, like all of your blessings just go to the wayside. And I don't know, that must be hard for a Kyoto cleric to see, like even though they supposedly live outside of time.
Yeah, I also noticed that with Mage a little bit too. If you have the ability that reduces the cost of a card in your deck by 2, and then that gets milled, or if a spell sprite gets milled, it feels pretty bad as well. But one of the things to mention with Cleric, if you are playing title Cleric, there's a very good Frost Arena deck right now that is super popular, and it's just a beast. I think Spit, his name is Spit on the forums, he posted it. It's all about Ardent Faction using the War Party Guide, and it just breaks the arena like so hard. And it uses both Prophet of the Sun, Ghost Howler, and then also Mesotonomist, along with the Righteous Paladin that Krita previously mentioned. Um, it's just super strong. And the Adamanthian Scrivener, of course.
Yeah.
Anyway, just thought I'd throw that out there.
All right. Well, and taking a look at the three classes, we have the cleric, the mage, the warrior, and uh, I like do people know if a fourth? Yeah, people know that there's going to be a fourth class coming up in the next set, correct? I believe that was spoiled by someone
Yes,
else
the
as well.
Ranger.
Yeah. So between cleric, mage, warrior, and eventually ranger, there's a very unique mechanic that works for each of those four. Cleric is obviously going to be blessings. Mage has the ability to cast additional spells. They have the ability to gain spell power. Warrior, what warrior just struck me as a very very like dumbed down guide, but at the same time there was a lot of depth to it as well, where like warrior just really wanted to just fight and get in there very very quickly with their battling power. And ranger, I I can't say anything
Yeah.
else about ranger, can I? No, I can't say
I
anything else
don't
about.
know. Like you probably know more than most of us, but I haven't. so I when I took a peek at some of the Rangers, I didn't look at Kyoto Rangers specifically,
Hmm.
but I am guessing that most of the Rangers will be themed around pets because a lot of the cards in Hex that are currently Rangers do have pets, at least on the human end of things. But also Rangers are usually more aggressive troops, like
Hmm.
they might have speed or so I'm really looking forward to Rangers being kind of in between a mage and a warrior
Hmm.
in terms of its speed and versatility and just explosiveness.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, like because each of these classes, like they have like a race and a class combination, I wouldn't be surprised if different, like if we do go along the idea that pets are a thing, then that different racial combinations with the ranger could perhaps have possibly different types of pets where uh, humans could have one type of pet, or a shin hair could have like a shroomkin type of pet. I could imagine something along those lines as well. So it's really interesting how Hex Ent really wants to flesh out that because they really want to make sure, from what we've seen in the past, that a racial combination with your class is going to play pretty unique, and you almost want to try every single racial combination and kind of theory, like min max theory it up enough.
Yeah, and from what I've heard, someone a while ago, and I don't know if this is true, but someone said they're spoiling some of the text files from the game that they dug up, and it had all this stuff about Rangers being very pet themed, but I don't know if that's true, so we still need to kind of wait for the word. I do know that we are getting super close to AZ2. I don't know the specific timeline, but but based on the kind of the buzz going around, I'm feeling that spoiler season is getting super close. So people that are on the edge of their seats, like just that have been craving this, should get ready to expect things coming from Hexent. We should probably see things on the main site very soon. And very soon is not a month. I'm thinking it's less than a month. So be prepared.
So are you saying less than a month for the release, or less than a month until we start getting spoilers?
Oh, less than a month before we start getting spoilers. I'm hoping for Friday. I don't know anything internally. All I know is little tidbits from what I've heard from the community, but I'm guessing that they're gonna start to hype AZ2
Hmm.
probably this Friday. Maybe if we're not lucky and we don't get anything this Friday, probably the following week.
Yeah, I would be surprised if we didn't hear anything by the following week. But so far, we've talked a lot about the Kyodal and their breakdown of the classes. And anything specifically that you want to mention, as I quickly go back to Kyodal, about the Kyodal Cleric, Mage, or Warrior? What have you experimented with? I've done Kyodal Cleric. I absolutely love it. Kyodal Mage just seemed kind of strange, where the elemental, the spell tornado wasn't something that I really wanted to experiment with.
So I'll just go into why I really like Coyote Mage really quickly. First, Sapphire as a threshold in color is very, very good in Mage for uncommons, not particularly Coyote, but
Hmm.
there's a lot of great mages that are uncommons in Sapphire, and you have access to three of them at the top level. You also have a good ability to generate spell power because of those mages. And if you build a deck that's more themed around spell power, not necessarily the tornado spell,
Hmm.
you can get quite a good value out of them. I don't know if they're better than a human mage because mage that's human has access to three rares, which
Hmm.
is a little bit better when you can get like Forgotten Tomb Seeker and Mangus as three copies.
Hmm.
But what I do like about Mage is for Coyote is also that added Zodiac blessing benefit, and I don't know, it just has a different feel to it than the human mage, and I have both. But that's the one that I play a lot. I don't have a Coyote Warrior, but I have played both Warrior and Cleric in playthroughs, and I do like the early game of the Coyote Warrior. Bright Moon Brave has very good boots equipment,
Hmm.
and it's actually you can build a pretty nice Coyote Warrior that's budget because of the options you have in Sapphire diamond, and wild.
Yeah, I think that's an important point to note that like different classes have because of their shard grids and what you have available might have different budgets as well. I think mage generally is like you can already look at the screen here maybe a little bit more uncommon heavy, and as you mentioned earlier, but yeah, generally warriors you can get out of the gates very very quickly as mentioned. All right, let's go ahead and move along to the elf shard grid with the elf cleric, elf mage, and elf warrior. I've had a lot of success personally with the elf mage. The embiggen spell is one of those things where you have a pump in hand and the AI, the computer AI, doesn't seem to realize that you can make one of your troops +3/+3. Also, the additional starting +6 health is an absolute bonus for mages because mages generally have less starting health than any of the other classes. So mages, I think it starts around 16 or 17 health, and any additional bonus health that you can get is always a really really big benefit.
Yeah, I totally agree. Elf Mage is probably one of the best campaign class race mixes for farming content. You can make very quick decks. The Embiggen spell is just amplified tremendously by cards that are pumping in other ways, like the Sting Shot Sniper with the gloves equipment
Hmm.
or a Quash.
Hmm.
Um, there are a lot of ways to throw money at Elf Mage because of the shard grid. As you can see, you have access to 3 rares and artifacts. You have 2 legendaries in artifact, and then you have 3 legendaries and 3 rares in both Ruby and Wild. So there's a lot of ways to just build really legendary and rare heavy decks that have a bunch of explosive power. I featured the Sommelier and the Cheesesmith, but I mean, if you're playing Mage and you want to go for the Mage threshold, one of the decks I'm playing now also has the Matriarch of Flames in it, which and she is exceptional now with her equipment. Also, Voice of the Ashwood has exceptional equipment, is
Hmm.
very good for this deck as well.
Yeah, both of those decks. It is generally. I find myself like loving the elf mage, but then at the same time, only having 2 uncommons. Like it kind of handicapped me sometimes as well. So it's very interesting that the elves themselves or the elf shard grid it has oftentimes more rares and legendaries than they do uncommons at the same levels, and it came about some funny crafting, and yeah, it is a very very high end deck. Moving along to let's head back to the elf cleric. I hate to say this, but I have no idea what a Genesis leaf is.
You know what? I don't remember. I think I've played an Elf Cleric through the campaign completely and cleared it, and I don't even remember what it does. I think it's some kind of constant that sits in play and gives you 1 health at the beginning of your turn, kind of like the Cheese
The
debris that sits in play.
mm-hmm.
But I can't remember either because it's been so long. I did a lot of my campaign running the very first 2 weeks, so it's hard for me to recall. But there are some very cool rares and I think Cleric for Elf was another one where there was hardly any in Ruby, but a lot in Wild. Like the Wild Root Dancer is a really good Elf Cleric. There's also the Kickstarter exclusive Hortensio. I can't remember the name of it, but it's also very good. Prospero, I think maybe. Anyway,
All right, and looking at the elf warrior, that what I like about the elf warrior is that it plays really really well into the ramping mechanic that was really I guess rampant for elves back when Chronicles of Entrath Chapter 1 was released. So when you battle a champion, gain 2 temporary resources, you can kind of drop down those larger resources early on and get some really really good plays. And warrior themselves seem very very straightforward, and being able to jump the curve early on does definitely help for those warriors if you need to get a big troop down in play in early, just getting it in early.
yes, and the Warrior class has access also to the Warrior Affinity, which pairs nicely with other ramp cards like Howling Brave, which actually happens to be a warrior. So if drop a Howling Brave or two, then on turn 2 or 3 you're already ready to battle, and you're going to have about 5 or 6 resources on turn 2 or 3 to just drop in a huge threat like a Tempestuous Blade Dancer, which is also warrior, and just you snowball from there. It's a really strong racial mechanic, that War Dancer battle buff, and I think it's a go-to class for a lot of farmers as well. It's probably on par with the Elf Mage in terms of its speed and effectiveness.
All right, and in terms of priciness, is it up there as well? Just because of the
No,
shard
it's
grid?
lower than Elf Mage, I would say, because even though you're focused still on rares, there's a lot of commons in Elf Warrior
Mm-hmm.
that are high value.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the good rares are actually, I think they're campaign based, so you can get a lot of the good rares for free in that in the shard grid.
All right, moving right along, we're moving into, I guess, one of the more like humanistic. I don't even know what I'm saying right now. It's late. We're moving on to the human race right now, where the cleric, mage, and warrior. I've played through as cleric, mage, and warrior, and all of them just seem pretty strong. I didn't quite like the blessings off of the human cleric, as sometimes you're not going to be going up against an undead, but being able to have access to the righteous paladin, even though you're not going to get too many of them early on, was definitely helpful. Also, getting the additional gold when you're at maximum level for any of those gold farmers out there, that's always a nice benefit as well. Looking at the mages and the warriors, the warrior being able to, like the ardent recruiter, one of the strongest cards in PvE, and then also combining in with some of the new primal dawn cards, ardent officers, giving all of your ardent troops +2/+1. Very, very strong ways to just get out of the gate. Warrior affinity also very helpful, as well as we take a look at the human side of the ardent faction.
Yeah, and just to add to all the classes, so the cleric, the human cleric, is great because there's just really great human cleric cards like the Righteous Paladin, as Fred mentioned, the Legionnaire and the Adamanthian Scrivener that are on the screen,
Mm-hmm.
also the Pious Paladin, and I think they're just going to continue to create and release great human clerics. So even without the cleric having the best generic power for the race class combo, it has great cards in human, and then you pair that with starting with an additional card for a dungeon boss encounter, and that just helps you um, defeat that dungeon. Mage, I have both a mage and a warrior. I love mage for human just because of the access to 3 rares for the shard grid. That gives you a lot of options in ruby, sapphire, or diamond, which is a nice tricolor to have access to 3 rares in. So you can either play tricolor human, or you can go more specific into just ruby, just sapphire, just diamond, and focus more on, how do I want to build my deck? I'm going to start with more cards than anyone else. So do I want to build some sort of combo around the rares that I have? So it's more of the higher brow. Do you have a more complete collection, and do you want to take advantage of it? If so, play Human Mage, especially when you can start with 9 cards against a dungeon boss. And then Warrior's battle mechanic for me is super fun to play with, and that's why I still have a Human Warrior, because you can flood the board with a bunch of cheap stuff. And that's actually one of the reasons why I featured the Ardent Recruiter, because if you can play him and then dump a bunch of 1-cost cards on the table, and then just battle the opponent, and then everything is pumped up on the board. And you can combo that with form ranks and the new card from set 5 that gives everything in play +1/+1. I think it's
Prepare for
called Battle
war.
Hymn or something.
Oh yeah, battle him, and then there's prepare for war if you want to get it even more crazy if you have a turn to buy.
Yeah, so you do both of those things, and then you can just have a crazy board state that most AI opponents and encounters cannot deal with.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to Human Warrior. I'm just opening up another uncommon slot. Right now, you can only run 2 Ardent Recruiters in the Human Warrior, and that's a little bit of a downside. Also, the Ardent Recruiter has really, really powerful equipment, I believe, where it gets +1/+1 every time you play an Ardent Troop, right? I think that's one of
Yeah.
yeah. So just really really high end, and being able to flood the board as you say, and then give them all plus one with your inspiring strike. And since you're playing so many warriors, and you can easily get that plus one affinity maybe once every 2 or 3 turns, as long as you're dropping shards and dropping warriors. So that's always, excuse me, always a good side there. Taking a look and moving right along to the orc side of things here on the ardent faction, we have the cleric mages and warrior. And what I really liked about, and I'm going to go back to this, is that between going from orc, human, and coyote, even though they're all clerics, they really do very very different things. An orc cleric seems to be much more, I guess, thematically a warrior, I would say, than the human clerics or the coyote clerics are. What do you have to say that on that PVE side of how an orc cleric functions versus how a coyote or a human cleric functions?
Yeah, so the orc cleric is interesting because really the majority of the orc clerics you'll find are actually in Ruby. Zakoi is one, I believe. There's a few other PvE only ones that are clerics. There's the Fierce Warlord that buffs all of your one cost troops.
Mm-hmm.
So for orc, cleric is more about being able to deal damage, which is interesting because with the cleric affinity, all that bonus damage is going to be turning into life drain as well. So they have a really unique way to gain health, and I think the only blood cleric is the Gordazuma. I don't think there's any other orc cleric in blood that is only in blood that is also cleric.
Mm.
I think there is one that's partially in blood that's considered a cleric, but anyway, they're more about raging up, attacking, and with the cleric uh, class, you can actually heal off of all of that bonus rage. And you can even see that with their Cogthopol's Blessing, they're focused more on generating rage than they are generating healing.
Yeah. What would you say about the shard grid? I mean, orcs, 4-3-2-1. I think thematically it works out very very well. Where there seems to be a lot of like low level orcs, and then as you get higher and higher up, there seems to be less and less and less. Four commons, three uncommons, two rares, one legendary. I found this particular shard grid just a little bit more difficult to build because a lot of the clerics I wanted to use the were the legendary and rare clerics, and trying to fill in the space with the other orc cards and other cleric cards, not having access to righteous paladin just because you have one across the boards on diamond as well.
From my perspective, and I think it's why I only have an Orc Warrior, I found that this shard grid is best for the warrior class, not so much because of the race that you're playing, but because of the access to four commons and there being a lot more common warriors that are in blood and Ruby that are very good. Like the oh gosh, now I'm totally blanking. There's actually a bunch of orcs that are very good that are in common slots, like the Brutal Bone Cracker has great equipment as well. And why am I playing? Mazat Spearman, I believe, is also
Yeah.
common. So there's some really good ones that you can get that are in the common slot. So you really want to maximize what your commons look like. For mage, there is that Darkspire Priestess that's on the screen, but there's not really much else that is a strong common blood or ruby mage that I can think of off the top of my head. But Warrior has great ones. Also, the Arena Regular that's up there on the screen is also another great common. So really, if you're going for this particular shard grid, you want to try to maximize the commons with equipment that you have access to. So it is a more budget-minded race to play for the shard grid, and then you have to kind of combo that with the class benefits you get for playing some of those better commons you like to play.
Yeah, but I think as we move forward, as you can level up your character higher and higher, I'd be surprised if you didn't get fours across the board, at least on your primary shards. I'm assuming a level 30 orc will have fours across the row in the blood and and in the Ruby section. Taking a look at the Mage for Orc, I actually haven't played on Orc Mage. Do you remember any of your feelings when playing Orc Mage?
Um, I don't remember my playthrough of Orc Mage very much, but I really like their spell Frenzy. It seems super good, and I I don't know why I wouldn't have played an Orc Mage. They don't have a lot of other benefits outside of pure damage, so you'd have to find a way to kind of compensate for the lack of health you start with.
Mm-hmm.
So I think maybe that's the major downside of Orc Mage is it's glass cannon. So how do I compensate for this glass cannon without dying? I would guess that Orc Mage is probably one of the harder classes to level with, or race class combos to level with. But once you get to the top, and in fact, once we get AZ2 and that top gets higher, it's going to be one of the better race class combos.
Yeah, so we're just trying to line things up all for when Chronicles of Entrath Chapter 2 is finally released. Moving on to Orc Warriors. Orc Warriors just seem like I think we already touched on this space earlier. Having access to a lot of those common and uncommon orc units, there's just better affinity, being able to deal additional damage, being able to hit harder, and being able to you're almost as the warrior trying to clear the way for your remaining troops to be able to push through. And I think that's one of the reasons why I liked running Orc Warrior. And also anytime you have Hunger of the Mountain God, and Hunger of the Mountain God, one of the best PvE rares that should be a staple in any blood warrior or any blood deck, regardless of what type of class you're running.
Yeah, and for the Orc Warrior, like there's all the Mountain God cards, and most every Mountain God card is also a warrior. So if you go Warrior Affinity, get trained troops, your troops are coming into play with speed. You can even play Fury of the Mountain God that gets reduced cost for every time a champion takes damage.
Mm-hmm.
So you can be dealing damage to yourself with one of the Mountain God cards, which most of them do at the start of the turn or through equipment. And then all of a sudden you have a Fury of the Mountain God that's at cost 2 or 3, and you can just drop it into play with gems. So there are a lot of ways to get your battles going off a lot if you're playing Warrior Affinity,
Mm-hmm.
and the battles are doing more damage. So it's actually a really good class for the talent tree, because there is the talents that are also around. When you deal damage, you deal additional damage, and when you take damage, you take additional damage.
Mm-hmm.
Can usually be more beneficial for you than cumbersome, depending on how you build that deck.
Yeah. Also being able to have access to 4 blood auras with equipment. So even if you are taking a little bit of damage, putting life drain on 1 or 2 of your warriors very, very early on can usually stabilize a bad board state or a bad draw, and it lets you swing a little bit more freely as well, with a combat trick in hand.
Definitely. I love to play Blood Aura with my Orc Warrior. I also love to play Call the Grave with Trinket equipment on my Orc Warrior, which can also be a good thing to combo with some of the Darkspire cards, because you can just get them all back out of the crypt and play them again. But that makes very good use of the common slot for Blood and the Shard.
All right, so we just spent a lot of time covering the 4 races and all of their current classes, from the PvE campaign. Next week, we'll probably follow up, if we do decide to do a Halloween cast. But for now, we have a new puzzle on hand, and this puzzle was, well, this puzzle takes a little bit of explaining, so I will let Nico go ahead and explain what's really happening here.
Oh god. Okay, so this was kind of a last minute addition, guys. So I'm sorry if it's a little wonky, but basically, what we want you guys to figure out is, how do you win before your opponent's next turn? You have 8 resources in your hand,
Or in play.
or 8 resources open. Your hand is a Kilopede and 4 Mind Calls. You have 2 Blood Threshold, 2 Sapphire Threshold, no charges. Don't worry about the champion; it doesn't matter. You need to win before the next turn. And then I've linked here, so you have to actually go to the link to do this puzzle. I've linked a deck and a crypt on Hex2CG browser. The deck will show you which cards are remaining in your deck, and the crypt will show you which cards have been played. So you can consider all the cards in the crypt played. You can figure out whatever you want based on that crypt. And then based on the deck, what card do you need to top deck to win before your opponent's next turn? So send me the answer and the math behind it to nicosharp@gmail.com. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me there as well. I don't mind giving a minor hint if you're having trouble. And I guess we'll do the prizes that we've been doing, which are still those Chronic Madness
The Hex
sleeve
Convocation
potentials.
2016, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I'm like totally not calling that correctly, but you have potential for that Chronic Madness sleeve that's heavily sought after. So good luck.
All right, so from all of us here at Cornerstone Guild and me and Niku, thanks for watching, thanks for listening. Definitely say hi to any of us if you happen to run into one of the two of us in on the ladder or in the gauntlets anywhere. I know Nico and I are currently having the same problem where we're both kind of out of packs and waiting for the new season to at least earn a couple of easy packs before we start, before we start really diving into PvE, which we both believe is just around the corner. So thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Hope you guys enjoyed it.
Thanks, everyone. See you next time.